Hey guys, so I competed in Wolfe Glick's GS Cup tournament, did pretty well, got number 68 overall. I think there was a little over 700 people enrolled. I actually started the tournament late and didn't get to finish all 20 matches, but I still managed to go 11-3, which I thought was great. The team performed extremely well, and I kind of wanted to do a team review for you guys to help kind of analyze the format a little bit. So starting off, we have a Choice Specs Calyrex-Shadow, absolute beast in this format. I went with a simple, timid 252 on speed and special attack with the last 4 in HP. My moveset was Grass Knot, Psychic, and Astral Barrage, with Trick to get rid of the choice specs. I never used Psychic or Grass Knot a single time. I just Astral Barraged like 25 times and Tricked like twice. Trick beats Geomancy Xerneas. If you're in a bad spot, you can take their Power Herb, and then Astral Barrage is a spread move that just wrecks things. Grass Knot's there for Kyogre Psychics in case there's a normal type. Pretty straightforward set. The choice specs was really important to pick up some crucial KOs. Second, I had Regieleki, or Regivolt as it should have been called, with a Focus Sash to help as a cleanup and speed control option. We went with a modest max special attack, max speed. The only thing you really gain by going timid over modest is outspeeding neutral nature Venusaur, so not a big deal. Then we have Electro Web, Thunderbolt, Protect, Extreme Speed. Electro Web and Thunderbolt and Protect are all very standard, I would say. Electro Web for the speed control, good spread damage, Thunderbolt for whooping things, and Extreme Speed for cleaning up. We have Yveltal, Life Orb, super powerful. This guy was the MVP and the main Dynamax candidate. We went with modest special attack and speed. I did a lot of special attackers to avoid dealing with Intimidate from Incineroar here, and Landorus Therian, I guess. We got Dark Pulse and Oblivion Wing for the stab moves. Dark Pulse is a nuke, especially when Dynamax. Oblivion Wing is good for recovery. Sucker Punch to finish off weakened foes. Even with the minus attack nature, it still does quite a bit. And then Protect. To support that, we have Clefairy with an Eviolite and obviously Friend Guard. As for EV training, I did Bold Max Defense, but with just enough special defense to survive a Mystic Water Origin Pulse from Kyogre. I was really afraid of Kyogre with this team, so I made sure to EV some mons to narrowly survive. We have Icy Wind, Follow Me, Helping Hand, and Protect. I didn't think Dazzling Gleam would be as useful because I didn't think Urshifu would be floating around too much. Follow Me is Follow Me. It's a move that's so powerful it basically carries Clefairy and others as a Pokemon. Helping Hand is nice to help you pick up crucial one-hit KOs on things like Zacian that you otherwise can't get. Just a good support Pokemon. Then we have Rillaboom, G-Max Rillaboom with the Miracle Seed. It's a pretty good Kyogre killer. I went with max HP and max attack Adamant Nature. Got the Grassy Surge in there just to hit hard and be tanky and stick around as long as possible. Then for moves, we have the 70 base power priority Grassy Glide, which actually with the Miracle Seed one-shots Kyogre, or at least most Kyogre variants. Have U-turn for repositioning and hitting in DD, I guess. Then you have Fake Out, which is very important in this format to beat Zacian, and Protect, just to help keep the Rillaboom around a little bit longer for more Grassy Glide support. Next we have Incineroar. I went with the Citrus Berry because a lot of attacks bring it to just about below half. It's nice recovery. As for EVs, I just took enough special defense so that it could survive a +2 modest Moonblast from Xerneas, or a neutral, timid Origin Pulse, as long as it has Friend Guard active, and the rest goes in defense and HP. Just a bulky Incineroar set, pretty straightforward. The moves should be pretty familiar to you if you're familiar with what Incineroar does. You have Fake Out for pressure, Parting Shot for stat drops and repositioning, getting more Intimidates off, Snarl to nerf the special attackers, and having a spread move comes up pretty often actually. And then Flare Blitz just to have a really strong stab attack coming off of your defensive Pokemon. I want to show you guys a few matches. We have the first match of the day actually. The opponent's running a Tailwind Kyogre here, which is very frightening to me. It's actually the thing I've prepared the most for, but my legendaries are the least prepared for. So I just decided to lead Rillaboom to deal with the Kyogre, and I figured I'd want extra Fake Out pressure to hit the Whimsicott, keep the Tailwind from coming down, and then just finish off with my Restricteds for some power. Wasn't really sure how to handle this because I saw the Zacian, the Stack Attack Trick Room mode, but looking at their team leading Incineroar, Intimidate, and double Fake Out seems pretty good. Then just a heads up that I'll be skipping or speeding up long animations as needed to make the video go a little more smoothly. So the opponent leads Whimsicott and Incineroar here. I'm immediately thinking Tailwind and Fake Out, or Tailwind and Parting Shot into Kyogre, something threatening like that. Just gonna fast forward through some Grassy Surges and Intimidates and such here. Did they really need to show each attack drop individually? Alright. Go for Fake Out, Fake Out. My Rillaboom's faster than Incineroar, so I get both of mine off, and I keep the Tailwind from going up. Again, just going to fast forward through the animations a little bit in the interest of time. I would skip them, but the animations are kind of fun, and keeping them in lets us keep track of what's going on in the match a little better. So here I'm a little worried. I want to try to kill this Whimsicott if I can. It's got chip damage on it, so if it had a Focus Sash, it's broken now, and I figure that my Incineroar can probably KO. I'm protecting the Rillaboom in the hopes that I can stop a Flare Blitz or Parting Shot coming out of their own Incineroar from KOing or otherwise disrupting my plans, maybe deny them the free switch. And for the most part it works out okay. I did make a crucial mistake though, which is my Incineroar is currently intimidated, and I forgot that, so I actually don't get off the full KO on Whimsicott here. Tailwind goes up of course, but I didn't really have a way to stop that from happening anyways. And then his Incineroar taunts, presumably to stop me from using some Parting Shot shenanigans to reset my Fake Out, reset stat drops. I don't know what he was going for necessarily. And then Flare Blitz comes through, and it doesn't kill because I'm intimidated, which is not great because now the Whimsicott is still there. Can potentially switch out to set Tailwind again later. Not ideal. Anyways, I go for the U-turn here to try to hopefully kill this Whimsicott, and then I go for the Snarl for the presumed Kyogre switch in. This play preserves my Rillaboom for later, so it won't be intimidated in the face of Kyogre. And then the Snarl's kind of a catch-all in case he switches in the Kyogre, or maybe the U-turn doesn't kill. Here we see the Whimsicott getting off some damage before it goes down, and then the Parting Shot pops out, presumably to reset, Fake Out, and Intimidate for later. That's pretty standard. It did surprise me a little bit here by going into Zacian instead of the Kyogre. I definitely anticipated Kyogre here to switch in with the Tailwind and just start wrecking me with Origin Pulse. Anyways, here comes the U-turn, and it doesn't kill either because I'm intimidated on Rillaboom too. I was really sloppy with the Intimidate math here. Luckily, I still have the Snarl coming through. So I go into Yveltal, it's free because the Moonblast already came down, Zacian's here, and Zacian, despite all his power, is very easy to protect against, so you can just protect to stall out the Tailwind turns. Snarl comes through, picks up the KO on Whimsicott, thankfully. So now I'm in kind of a tricky situation because I want to get my Incineroar reset and reposition for the Zacian to get a Fake Out off on it, get an Intimidate off on it. And of course I really want to save this Incineroar now because their last Pokemon is Cinderace. I'm predicting either a Play Rough or Behemoth Blade onto my Yveltal and probably a Dynamax into Max Knuckle here, especially because he still has Tailwind up, and a bonus attack boost on the Zacian is extremely threatening. So I go for Protect on Yveltal to stop the Play Rough damage, and then I figure I better switch into Rillaboom so I can get some Fake Out pressure on the Zacian, hopefully kill it next turn, and not have to deal with losing my Incineroar. Keeping the Incineroar around is extremely crucial in this matchup, and I don't want to eat that Max Knuckle. So Rillaboom comes in, which is a little awkward because he's actually going to be losing his Grassy Terrain soon here. Then we get our Gigantamax here, it's the Cinderace as predicted, and I'm sitting here thinking, yep, for sure, here comes the high jump kick, Dynamaxed, everything's going according to plan. Play Rough into Yveltal, that's exactly as predicted. And then we see a G-Max Fireball, which I think is not that great of a call, but he must have been very afraid of me Dynamaxing the Yveltal and going through Airstreams. He was trying to just kill it off while he still could. Even with the Protect up, it still did a huge amount of damage in my opinion. Now I have a dilemma on if I want to use Fake Out from Rillaboom or switch into Incineroar. I decide to Dynamax my Yveltal so I can match the Max Airstream that I think is going to come out of this Cinderace, which does mean probably sacrificing the Rillaboom, but I get the Fake Out off into Zacian, which gives me an extra turn of tempo. Next turn I'll bring in Incineroar after the Rillaboom dies, and then I can have another Fake Out going off. But they call my bluff and switch back into Incineroar, which I didn't predict. Maybe they thought my Yveltal was physical Yveltal. I'm not 100% sure about that. But in any case, I'm going to lose my Rillaboom for essentially nothing here. I'm in a pretty tricky spot now because my Calyrex does outspeed Zacian, but it doesn't one-hit KO it without helping hand support. Maintain my speed advantage and don't let the Zacian get a speed boost from Max Airstream. If I do that, my late game becomes a lot worse because I don't outspeed the Zacian. This Incineroar is going to be a problem too because it resists Astral Barrage and is quite tanky. So the goal, the end game for me, is to get rid of Cinderace without letting Zacian come in and get an Airstream boost while keeping Incineroar on the field. Fortunately for me, the Tailwind is now gone from the battlefield, which lets me start to execute on my plan a little more. I also have the Fake Out presence on my Incineroar, so I can bring in Incineroar here, get the Intimidate down on Cinderace, and Fake Out their Incineroar, and then hopefully KO the Cinderace using Max Darkness, getting a special defense drop on their Incineroar in the process, which is important so my Calyrex's Astral Barrage will actually have a chance to KO this Incineroar. I end up sitting in the tank on this decision for quite a while. I'm trying to decide if I should Fake Out the Incineroar or if I should predict a switch to Zacian and use Parting Shot to reset my Intimidate and my Fake Out again for the next turn. I'm also taking a quick second just to check the speed tiers and make sure, 100% sure that my Yveltal will outspeed Zacian with just +1 on Airstream, so I don't need to Airstream again to outspeed it next turn. Which makes it safe to go for the Max Darkness, get the defense drop like I mentioned, and then just take the free Fake Out onto their Incineroar. This is my best play here because it prevents their Incineroar from parting shotting my Yveltal, which is I think what they were going for on this turn. Cinderace comes out with the Max Airstream as expected. Doesn't do too much to Incineroar because they are intimidated. A crit would have been pretty bad there, but it worked out. And comes the clutch Citrus Berry, always nice. and the Max Darkness for the KO and the defense drop. I take a second here to double check my speed tiers, make sure that my Yveltal will outspeed Zacian as confirmed before, make sure that it will outspeed my own Calyrex as well. I have basically two options now that the Zacian's here and we're in the end game. The opponent can't switch anymore, so I figure that the safest bet is to try to preserve my Incineroar with a parting shot, just to reset the defense drop pressures, and go for a Max Darkness to get the special defense lowering on the Zacian, which should guarantee the KO from my Calyrex. So once this Max Darkness lands, I've essentially won the game. 2 special defense drops on Incineroar and 1 on Zacian is enough for the Astral Barrage to one-hit KO all of them. So even if he double protects here, which I think is pretty unlikely, I should have the game wrapped up. As long as I don't do something stupid, like bring in my Calyrex and let it eat a Snarl or something like that. So I just have to play very careful. Down goes the Max Darkness. Nearly takes out this Incineroar despite the resistance, which I was pretty impressed by. Yveltal's really overperforming this match. Then the Zacian comes through with a really strong play rough, actually takes out the Yveltal. That's the power of +1 Zacian for you. But the Yveltal dying is just fine because my end game is the Calyrex attack, which should still one-hit KO everything. And I actually get to do the funny interaction where Incineroar is the last Pokemon on the field, uses Parting Shot and switches out, brings in my Calyrex early, and then gets to switch in normally for the KO replacement, so I get to get my Intimidate off, and I have Fake Out Pressure. And the special defense drops are down, so the game is wrapped up at this point. I don't think there's any way I can possibly lose. It's essentially a guaranteed victory. Especially since I have Fake Out Pressure from my Incineroar, I really can't mess this up. Technically, the Zacian could survive if it had some bulk investment, HP or special defense, but even if that was the case, maybe I could have technically lost if it was like a bulk invested agility Zacian and they got double protect off, but the point's moot because they don't double protect. Astral Barrage comes down, will pick up both KOs as predicted. It was a good game. I was very surprised that the opponent didn't bring Kyogre. I thought the Tailwind Whimsicott into Kyogre was extremely threatening to my team. But we take the wins, so that's one match down. Alright, next match, we immediately see 2 humongous threats in the form of Xerneas and Kyogre. I also see the Rage Powder Amoonguss there to pair with the Xerneas, which is a big threat for me. So the way I beat that lead is actually with Calyrex Clefairy. Clefairy uses Follow Me to absorb the Spore, and then Calyrex uses Trick to give a Choice Specs to the Xerneas. It's pretty shaky, especially if the Amoonguss has Focus Sash, but it's my best option against such a powerful lead. And with that, the match is underway. I did make one mistake. I mispredicted my opponent's lead. I thought they'd be going for the classic Amoonguss Xerneas. They actually lead Incineroar Xerneas. Luckily, that doesn't really change my math at all. I can still go for Follow Me, and I can still get my Trick to Choice Specs onto the Xerneas to stop the Power Herb. In fact, unfortunately for my opponent, this is actually better for me because my Clefairy doesn't end up asleep in this situation, so I can trick my Choice Specs over to Xerneas here. Follow Me to guarantee that I can't get hit by like a Darkest Lariat or something on my Calyrex and finish it off. The best play would be Snarl out of the Incineroar, but even that is not as scary, because the Xerneas is still choice locked and then it's forced to Dynamax. So yeah, there's the Fake Out onto Clefairy. Trick to give the Choice Specs over. Steal the Power Herb. This is pretty powerful because now the Xerneas is forced to spend a turn on the field doing essentially nothing as it finishes its charge turn. Then when my turn rolls back around, I go for the Helping Hand Astral Barrage to get a lot of damage done on the Xerneas before it gets the defense boosts up. I take a second to check if the +1 speed on Xerneas would still outspeed Calyrex or not. Turns out that +1 speed Xerneas does, as long as it's timid. So I go for the Helping Hand Astral Barrage just as planned. I'll get a lot of damage done to Xerneas, so then he's going to have a choice-locked Xerneas locked into Geomancy with very little health. And that's just a bad situation to be in. He'd have to take a switch, which gives me another free Astral Barrage on the next Pokemon that switches in, or he'll have to Dynamax a Xerneas that has 1/4 of its HP remaining. So my opponent at this point is in a really tough position. If he leaves in Xerneas and doesn't Dynamax, then I get to pick up the KO with Astral Barrage and start snowballing my special attack. And if he does Dynamax, then he's weak to my Follow Me. But then Taunt comes down and it's not on Clefairy. He must have been worried that I was some kind of nasty plot setup variant of Calyrex and wanted to stop that in its tracks, but because he didn't taunt the Clefairy, now I can do Follow Me, which covers the Dynamax option on Xerneas. And I go for another Astral Barrage, which either picks up a KO on Xerneas or a bunch of free damage on the switch-in. Meanwhile, I haven't even touched my back 2 yet, so I'm in a great position here. The opponent takes a really long time to consider his options before deciding to Dynamax the Xerneas and break the choice lock. I do tend to agree with this a little bit if I don't have Clefairy out for Follow Me. I didn't run the calc, maybe my opponent did run the calc that Astral Barrage wouldn't KO the +2 Xerneas after Dynamax, and then he does go for Max Steel Spike to finish off the Clefairy. He kind of calls my bluff a little bit on that. I think my opponent played this pretty well. They must have run the calc because in the end the Xerneas does survive the Astral Barrage, which means that depending on what I brought in the back, he still has a +2/+2/+2 Xerneas. And then the Flare Blitz from Incineroar comes down, does a ton of damage to my Calyrex. So I'm actually not in a great spot. However, I have Rillaboom, and Rillaboom has Grassy Glide. So I'm thinking, if I bring in the Rillaboom, I can Grassy Glide down the Xerneas, and then I can pick up my KO using Astral Barrage on the Incineroar, because it'll be single target Astral Barrage after that. As you can see, that's what I go for, Grassy Glide to Revenge Kill the Xerneas, and an Astral Barrage to hopefully pick up the KO on this Incineroar. I think that, depending on the bulk the Incineroar has, this loses to Max Guard on the Xerneas, which might let the Incineroar survive the Astral Barrage, get a Flare Blitz off, KO my Calyrex, which would be very unfortunate. However, the opponent doesn't see this line, or maybe they think that the Incineroar will die anyways, so I managed to pick up my Revenge Kill, and then Astral Barrage comes down, and exactly as planned, takes out the Incineroar with single target ghost damage. Which also picks up my Grimnay special attack boost. So the opponent's last Pokemon are Lando T and Amoonguss. This is pretty good for me normally, but gotta remember that my Calyrex doesn't have choice specs, so I'm not likely to one-hit KO this Amoonguss with Astral Barrage. However, I do still go for it anyways, get a lot of spread damage off, and I still have my Dynamax option in the back with Yveltal. I also know that I can get off a pretty powerful Grassy Glide on the Landorus, who's the only real threat remaining in the match, because Rillaboom, being a Grass type, is immune to Rage Powder. However, I do end up protecting my Rillaboom just on the off chance that this Landorus has an Assault Vest. I didn't want to get doubled in with U-Turn and Sludge Bomb, have the Rillaboom die. It seemed pretty shaky. I figured at this point the only way I could lose was by making a big mistake and getting somebody killed out of position, and then having my Calyrex not do as much damage as I wanted. You know, maybe something like a crit U-Turn could come through, and then Spore hits my Calyrex, and I'm in big trouble. So I wanted to preserve the Rillaboom for an option to knock out this Landorus now, on the next turn, while getting my Yveltal in safe, in case Calyrex did die. Really, at this point, given that I have my Dynamax Yveltal remaining in the back, who can one-shot the Amoonguss, probably even through Protect at this point, I think I'm in just fine shape. The Grassy Glide is going to come down and knock out Landorus, but not before we get to see the interaction with Rage Powder and Grass types. Rillaboom's like, what? You think I'm afraid of you? No, I'm going to go kill this lion over here. So there's that, and then we get the Astral Barrage for our final KO. Calyrex was really the MVP for all of these matches. He probably picked up half or 2/3 of all of my KOs in the entire tournament. This really goes to show how effective tricking a surprise choice item into Xerneas can be. I think my opponent played very well, though, all things considered, so good game there. Now, this is the final sample match I'm going to show. The opponent has a really cool Trick Room, Weakness Policy, Giratina lineup. At least that's what it looks like at first. They also have Indeedee and Xerneas for just the classic Follow Me and Geomancy setup. Basically, depending on what they pick, I was going to lose to either of their leads. I ended up deciding to lose to the Xerneas lead and beat the Giratina lead, so I led with my Yveltal, and I brought Clefairy Calyrex in the back to hopefully deal with the Xerneas in case he Dynamaxed it. I could use Follow Me to stall it out. In an unusual turn of events, my opponent does not end up leading the classic Giratina Dusclops or Xerneas plus Redirection. They end up leading both of their legendaries right off the bat, Xerneas Giratina, which my lead actually matches up fairly well on, because I figure that the Giratina is probably going to Dynamax and the Xerneas is probably going to Geomancy, and I have Fake Out pressure on the Xerneas. However, I run the calcs, and depending on the bulk investment that the Giratina has, a Max Darkness might just end up triggering Weakness Policy and nothing else, and I don't want to make a mistake on that front, so I switch into Calyrex instead, take the Fake Out on Xerneas, and I figure that a Dynamax Giratina won't be doing much damage as long as they don't trigger the Weakness Policy too early. As predicted, the Giratina does go for the immediate Dynamax, probably hoping that I would Max Darkness or Dark Pulse into it, and then I can pick up a KO with the Max Wormwind and a Weakness Policy. The Xerneas does see the Fake Out coming, hits Protect, that's pretty smart, pretty standard. That's definitely one of the big strengths of Fake Out, is making your opponent predictable by forcing them to Protect or Flinch. And then, as predicted, the Max Wormwind comes into my Yveltal slot. Probably was hoping for the Max Darkness, Survive, Weakness Policy, all that. But instead, all he gets is some damage on Calyrex, who doesn't care at all about an attack drop and is going to be able to do its job of Specs Astral Barrage anyways. At this time, I'm thinking about Astral Barrage doubling and then using Grassy Glide to KO the Xerneas. But then I remember I'm max Wormwind attack dropped right now, so I take some time to do some calcs, figure out just how much damage my Astral Barrage will do to Giratina, how much it might do to Xerneas, how much my Grassy Glide would do to Xerneas, see if I can get a KO there, or if I'm going to die to a Geomancy here. I realized that as long as the Xerneas has any amount of bulk investment at all, which is pretty common, I'm not going to be able to pick up the KO, and I'll be facing down to Geomancy Xerneas next turn. So, after much consideration, I decided to U-turn out to preserve my Fake Out, reset the attack drop in my Rillaboom. Now that the Xerneas can't Dynamax, it is susceptible to Fake Out, so I figure that's my win condition, is faking out the Xerneas after getting rid of the Giratina using Max Darkness. The Astral Barrage will do enough to get the Giratina in range for Max Darkness. I'm not sure if Giratina gets Max Airstream. I'm checking the odds that that'll happen. It's a whole lot of frantically checking Pokemon DB in my damage calculators, but in the end I do go for the U-turn. Come on, don't run out of time. Alright, yep. Get the U-turn off, just to save my Fake Out for later. And he goes for a switch, probably predicting some horrible amount of damage into Xerneas before it gets the Geomancy off. He wants to save that win condition for later. But oh, his Whimsicott doesn't have a Focus Sash, so it just dies in one hit to Astral Barrage. So that was a sacrificial switch. I don't know if he was expecting that. Weakness Policy does proc into Giratina, but it's definitely slower than my Yveltal, and I'm taking a bit of a gamble that it's not going to have Max Airstream. The Giratina is going to Max Wormwind, finish off my Calyrex, but that's fine. I still have my Dynamax threat. My Dynamax threat does outspeed Giratina, does one-shot it with the Max Darkness from Yveltal. I will have a U-turn for a little extra chip, and then I'll have Fake Out reset in the back. And because of the interaction with double battles and KOs and switching moves, I actually get to U-turn out of Giratina while resetting my attack drops on Rillaboom, and then bring it right back in for Fake Out pressure on the Xerneas that'll come in, probably. So I take a second to think if I want to do Clefairy Yveltal or Rillaboom Yveltal. I end up deciding that Yveltal to KO the Giratina and Rillaboom for Fake Out pressure on the Xerneas is definitely the best option. It just covers all my bases, because Yveltal still probably loses to a Xerneas, and you want to have the Rillaboom there to back it up. So welcome back, Rillaboom. You just left, and now here you are again, except this time you don't have a Max Wormwind attack drop, and you can use Fake Out again. I love all these extra little interactions that happen in double battles but not single battles. It really makes the VGC format so much better than singles. A lot more depth and complexity to what you can do. So here's the Fake Out into Xerneas, probably just going to protect again, but that's fine. Just, again, forcing them to protect while I can pick up a KO with Max Darkness is great. I do take a quick pause to consider if the Giratina uses Max Guard, what happens to me. And I think that there's not really anything I can do to avoid that. It would be funny to use Max Darkness onto Xerneas as a predict when it protects, get the special defense drop on Xerneas. That would be like game-winning over-predict. But I don't want to throw the game by Max Darkness in the Xerneas slot as it protects, and then Giratina doesn't Max Guard and attacks me. And I think my opponent's kind of thinking the same thing, like whether they should Max Guard, which is the obvious play, or if they should try to get a cheeky one-hit KO on my Yveltal using their Weakness Policy proc. I end up deciding that the only way I can lose is if I lose Yveltal. Yveltal can fight anything they have except Xerneas, and then the Rillaboom plus Clefairy can fight Xerneas. So as long as I play it straightforward, I really shouldn't be able to lose. The Xerneas protects on the Fake Out, that's fine. And notably, the Giratina does not Max Guard, which means, to me, I think they were going for that risky play to try to gut out the win here. Max Darkness will wrap up the Giratina kill, no problem. And now I think I've pretty much got it in the bag. No matter what they bring, Yveltal is going to be able to do major damage to it on the side. And then 2 Rillaboom Grassy Glides should be enough to kill the Xerneas. And Rillaboom will not die to a Dazzling Gleam. And it also will not die if I have Follow Me up for Moonblast. So I'm thinking I'm pretty safe here. Cinderace is the last Pokemon, which is a threat. It's definitely a threat, faster than everything I have left on my team, but it's not faster if I use Max Airstream on my Yveltal, so I decide that going for Grassy Glide into Xerneas, who just protected... No, not U-turn. Grassy Glide, there we go. Grassy Glide into Xerneas, who just protected and is not going to probably be able to protect again. Followed by a Max Airstream, should be enough to kill it, even with its Geomancy buffs, and then I'll just have Cinderace left versus a Dynamax Yveltal with a Clefairy on the side, so should be a pretty straightforward endgame. The Pyro Ball is going to come in and knock out my Rillaboom, which is pretty risky, actually, because if this Max Airstream doesn't KO the Geomancy Xerneas, I might be in a rough spot where I have to eat a Dazzling Gleam with Friend Guard. I know I can take it, but a crit could win. So I'm sitting here hoping that the calc I ran was accurate, that it's like a timid max speed, max special attack Xerneas, doesn't have a bunch of bulk invested, and this Airstream will KO. Luckily for me, Yveltal's power is unmatched, and it does pick up the KO on the Xerneas, leaving me with the proposed endgame of just Clefairy Yveltal versus Cinderace, which is not a problem for me at all. Follow Me beats everything Cinderace has. And Max Darkness is definitely going to be a one-shot here, so the game is essentially over at this point. I just have to click my moves, and Clefairy comes in, a good friend to Yveltal, and says, "Follow me, Cinderace, don't hurt my friend. Let him kill you with Max Darkness." Which I go for, here we are. And even if the Cinderace is a Focus Sash, I don't think there's any way it can possibly defeat me, because I'm faster than it with Max Airstream now, so... Except wait, it's a Scarfed Cinderace, which just even more means that I definitely win, because Pyro Ball is not going to kill the Clefairy, not even a crit would have done it. And Max Darkness comes through for the KO. Good set from the opponent. Really a good team overall. I kind of would have liked to see the Dusclops come in for like a Trick Room, Weakness Policy, Giratina setup or something, but sometimes leading both threats is just the way to go in this format. And that's all, folks. Thanks for watching the video, and if you enjoyed it and want to see more competitive Pokemon content, consider subscribing to the channel. Peace!